Alright, so we've got a pile of wood over there. It's actually okay. It's a decent pile of wood. Wait a minute. Hey Wesley, it's meant to taper in. What's going on here? Why is there a giant stack of thing here? Anyway, I'm gonna let you solve that actually. Never mind. You know what? You take your time and solve that. I'm gonna keep stacking wood. Q says, so space that's not used, question mark. The space that... It's basically, Q, the space that the architect forgot to design. If that makes sense. Although, we try to also consider the negative space. Because, you know, like when you design architecture, you are told that you need certain things. Like for example, if you design a house, the client would tell you, alright, we need like 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a lounge, dining, toilets, right? And then you put all those things into a plan, and then all the stuff that's left behind is the negative space. It's still space, it's just the stuff that, you know, it's the implicit space. It's not the space that's explicitly specified for you, I guess, is a way to define it. Q says, yeah, that's what I mean by gaps between the boxes, the area that wasn't really considered when designing. But we also try to consider it, Q, right? As good architects, we try to consider that as well. Helena says, just think about the oldest pyramids. They were built out of cubes, so it has a lot of corners. Well, I mean, Minecraft is made out of cubes. We are very familiar with corners here. Wesley is an expert in cubes. So Wesley, what I've been doing is I've been like pulling in from the smaller side, so then I don't overextend. Because I see you pulling the logs in from the bigger side. Anyway, it's just what I've been doing. Helena says, in the end, the design just consists of 5 identical cubes and mini-cube staircases. And that's basically it. But I mean, it's never that simple. I like it, Wesley. Nobody knows what's going on. I think the point of this, your design, Helena, is that we can see, or we learn that, like, you know, boxes aren't just boxes. Once you start putting them together, they create a lot of interesting shapes. Even though it's just boxes. I mean, just, you know, just boxes, quote unquote. Helena's still researching. Let me look at these. What about windows like this? Okay, let me look at this. I see an owl. Wait a minute. Full screen webcam. Q says, why did you go for lining up the edges of the two biggest that are on the ground? Doesn't it make the design too normal, if you know what I mean? Alright, that's directed at Helena. There's a lot of furry animals here, look at that. We're not gonna put a giant furry animal in our design. Or like a giant owl. But, considering windows, so yeah, maybe the skylights can be like a tree hollow. Tree hollow, and a lot of these tree hollows have animals in them. Look at that thing. Alright, back into the game. What are we doing here? Vaguely wood-like shapes. There's a lot of stuff we have to fill in down here. Which, let me keep going. Helena says, I guess I started off like that, Q. Experimented a lot with how the cubes would intersect or interact. Let me just quickly look at what Q was talking about. The back of it, yeah, the back of it is flush. But maybe, does it matter? It doesn't necessarily matter because it does create a doorway. Like if you don't have, I mean hold on, let's full screen again. Because it does allow for there to be a clear doorway there, for example, which you wouldn't get if you don't actually have the two flush like that. Or can you? No, not if you want them to be the same size, the cubes. Q says cool, it's almost like you could use mathematics to get an optimal structure and the boxes' relationship to each other as being minimized in terms of how close to lining up they are. It's one of these ideas that people have had, but I don't think I've seen it done too successfully. Like using mathematics to drive design, Q. Like I like it's an idea that I've heard before, but I don't think I've seen it done all that successfully, or at least in the end the architect still has to like make some judgment calls and not just rely on the math completely. But you know, like conceptually you might think, well, can't we just have an algorithm define the shapes and the placements of the spaces. Helena says there are some people of my class who had a building based on the golden section. Yeah, like students do that every year, Helena. and I mean, my opinion of stuff like the golden section and other like mathematical principles is that in the end the architect still makes a judgment as to how they're applied. So I'm a little bit dubious about supposedly mathematically defined architecture. I mean, not that I'm not saying it's not possible, I'm just saying I haven't really seen it done rigorously and successfully. Maybe AI will solve that though, in the near future. Q says like you could assign a fractal number to something, whether that's a box, room or something, or choose a fractal quotient that the whole design is based on. Yes, Q, yes. Yes, you can. Helena says, when I saw the stream last week, it just reminded me of an assignment I had a couple of years ago. Oh yeah? Like the... But like, if you use a fractal, let's say, to make designs, how do you choose which part of it, for example, to use, or like how do you choose which is good and which is bad? Q says, I guess what I'm narrowing in on thinking about this is how Minecraft builds its world. Yes, but a persistent complaint I have about Minecraft worlds is that they're not that interesting. Like Minecraft worlds, yes, they're fractals, but they're fractals that aren't as interesting as real landscapes. I guess it's missing things like erosion. I'm thinking maybe it needs to be a collaborative effort between the computer and the people. If you imagine like an AI queue, like a learning algorithm where you can have feedback from people. So it generates shapes, and then you kind of give people a series of shapes and let the people like choose, like, do you like this or do you dislike this? You can click like or dislike. And then the AI takes that and then generates more shapes based on what you like and what you dislike. Maybe it needs to be that sort of process, because the calculator or the algorithm doesn't really understand human motivations. It just generates shapes. Just thinking maybe we should knock this back a little bit. Anyway, AI and architecture is it's going to be interesting. My complaint about fractal worlds, or like fractal terrain generation, is that it leaves out things like erosion and plate tectonics. Q says, and then match to whether they like living in the spaces they design, i.e. whether there's a difference between aesthetics in real life versus on LCD in art. Yeah. And maybe, yeah, that's right, so maybe you don't even measure what they like, but how they use the spaces, right? So you measure like occupancy rates. Like if people say they like a space but nobody ever actually goes in there, then They don't really like it. What is Helena linking? Boxes. Let me just show this. Are those actual packaging boxes? They are, right? They're beer boxes, right? 2000 beer boxes. And then that one. So let me just like show this stuff on stream. So for now, the way architects use computers is to calculate these complex curves and to like have machines make the parts that make up the complex curves. So like, you know, each of these panels is a very specific shape, and then you use a computer to calculate the very specific shapes, and then you use robotic machines to make these shapes. So this is how architects are using computers right now. It's not AI yet, right? It's just like using computers to calculate curves to get stuff like this, which is alright. It's alright. Q says they're nice to look at but not to live in. Artist living spaces date really quickly, I'd imagine. I mean, you'll notice things like this, like the actual space is just flat. It's like... Wesley says I mostly sent those for the station. Yeah, so like, you know, like the roofs where you don't interact. Like the parts that are not interactive is these wacky curves, whereas the parts that you do interact with is just a flat piece of ground. Is what it ends up being, Q. A lot of the time. And, oops. And I do have criticisms for stuff like this, is that the edge or the boundaries between, or like the parts where the humans interact with the buildings end up being awkward. Or like, you know, stuff like this, you'll notice like the interactive parts is just flat and benches, like rectangular benches. I guess they are curved a little bit as well. And then the non-interactive parts are shaped like that. Yeah, again, I mean, there's a little bit of curve down here, which is interactive, but most of it is non-interactive. Most of it is stuff that the people don't actually touch or walk on or sleep on or sit on. I'm not sure if you even sit up here or walk up here. So I do have reservations about this stuff. It does look cool, Helena. I mean, like, that's kind of cool. It's brick though. Okay, that's kind of cool. Q is complaining about efficiency. Yeah, a lot of these are just pavilions. Are they temporary or are they permanent? I think they're even temporary. Mostly they're used for art display. You're right, Helena, and I guess I'm halfway between Q and Helena here, in that I accept that they look cool and they're interesting, but in a way they're not too practical. And like, you know, art pavilions are easy because they're just display spaces, right? They're not really they don't have to function very much. It's not like a factory or an apartment building, right? Like a factory has to function. Which, you know, how do you make a thing look good and also function. It's much harder when you're not just doing a display space for art. So I guess like, stuff like this. So it functions as shelves and as a shop, but it's also curvy and things. But you'll notice the shelves are just like, flat boards. Like the horizontal board is just flat. So there's like when you have to make it practical, you still end up with these like straight flat lines where the practical stuff is.